Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, look at Robert was here. Michael's not here. I didn't get it. Okay. So good evening. Let's see if anyone's watching us. Oh, got papers? Okay. This cake, by the way, you can uncover the cake. How are you? Right behind you. It's covered by silver foil. Yeah. Oh, that was crawling on the cake and throw it out. If it's cake, you look. If you see ants, throw it. Now you can eat it. Now you can throw it out. If you don't mind, bring me a cup of tea. And you choose. It's one ant. Okay.
What? No uncle?
No uncle. It's a widowed ant. What can I tell you? What? Oh, his cousin. Okay. The ant is not kosher. No, ant is not kosher. Okay, so no ants. Yes, uncles. Okay. What? Michael said he's not feeling well, so he's not going to be here. But okay, let's begin, my friends. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So tonight, as always, there's a memory of Yisrael Ben Yosef, the Shamu Shem Elevation. We're going to talk about a holy Jew. A holy Jew. You know the joke. It's humble, whatever. About this. I'll tell you a story. Actually, I'll start with whatever. This I actually had a joke. I realized it doesn't really. The brain is stuff. I've tried for a few weeks. No, actually, the truth, I have the class, like the good gist of it, and then like I had a really busy afternoon, the evening, and the Hebrew school meeting, like this and that. I went like straight like half hour ago. I never like finished, formulating the beginnings and the ends, and like when you have the idea. Okay, I'm gonna tell you a story about this guy that came to a town. It's a true story. Instead of a joke, but it's a true story. But the joke I wanted to say is not going to work. So this rabbi comes to town. It's called a Magid. Back in the day, they used to have preaching Magidim. A Magid was a person that would travel from town to town, inspiring Jews to repent, to do teshuvah. So he once came to the town of Shmuel Munkis. Shmuel Munkis was a chassid of the Alter Rebbe, who was very, very spiritual, but he didn't like any monkey business. He didn't like any, fake, pretentious, holier than thou kind of attitude. And this preacher, he gets up to give this fiery sermon as if he's the holiest man in the universe. This rubbed Shmuel Munkis the wrong way. His pretending to be so holy and getting almost a pleasure for making everyone cry at thinking how terrible they are. They're such sinners, how they're going to burn in hell. They're going to suffer eternal sins. And he felt so good. I gave such a powerful sermon. Shmuel Munkis said, this guy needs to learn a lesson. Need to put him into his place a little bit. So anyway, that night, the guy goes to sleep in the inn where he's staying, this traveling rabbi. And all of a sudden, he wakes up in the middle of the night, and he sees a man, Shmuel Munkis, big tall man with a big coat standing over him, with a big butcher's knife. A chalaf, when you shecht an animal, you slaughter an animal. If you've ever been to a slaughterhouse, I've been to a slaughterhouse. So not what they use by kaparis. Kaparis is for birds, so that's like a small knife. You ever seen like slaughtering a cow? It's a big knife. He stands with this big, slaughtering knife and the stone. He sharpened the knife. He's standing and he's sharpening the stone on the knife on the stone. He wakes up and there's this guy standing over his bed with a big knife in his hand, sharpening the knife. Like, what are you doing? Well, Munkis got the key from the innkeeper to let him in so he could, where did you come from? So he says, today I heard you give the sermon. And you gave such an inspiring sermon to all of us, how wicked we are, how terrible we are, how we're going to burn in hell for our sins, how we should, be embarrassed of what the sinners we are. And I was thinking that you're right, and our whole city is full of terrible people. There's not even one holy, righteous, special person living in our entire town. And yet we know, the rabbis tell us that before the holidays, you should go pray at the grave of holy tzaddikim, of holy people, to intercede in heaven on your behalf. So I was thinking, since we're a town of sinners and the high holidays are coming up soon, and we have no holy people buried here in our town, maybe we could, bury you here so that you'll have someone where we need to inspire ourselves. We can go pray at your grave. So the guy starts saying, hold on. I'm not that holy, I'm saying? There's holier people. I don't know if you're going to bury a person in your town. There's holier people than me. Shmuel says, don't worry about it. We're not so particular. You already established that we're sinners and we're terrible and we're wicked. So relative to our level, you'll suffice as our holy man. We'll bury you. You'll be the holy tzaddik we'll come pray to before the holidays. So he's still he's sharpening his knife. He's sharpening the knife. I said, no, I have to tell you a secret. I've actually sinned a few times. I'm actually not such a tzaddik. I've done a few very, very small sins where there were moments of temptation where I wasn't exactly a righteous man. I'm not really, really a tzaddik, so I'm not going to meet your criteria. Sorry, you have to find someone else. And Shmuel Munkus is sharpening his knife. He's like, nah, that's it. That's compared to us, that's a sin. That's nothing. Big deal. We don't mind. You're still a good enough tzaddik for us. And the longer Shmuel Munkus is standing there and sharpening his knife, the longer that the list of confession and the longer the list of sins, that this holy man has done gets longer and longer. He's describing sin after sin, how he's really not so righteous, he's not so holy, he's not so pure. Until finally, after he spilled all the beans of all the sins that this guy has done in his life and made it very, very clear he's far, far from righteous, then Shmuel Munkus says to him, so if you were such a holy Jew, who gave you the right to come give all this guilt to all these innocent, sincere people that want to be holy, that want to be connected to God, and you came and you laid it into them and you gave them this guilt? What right do you have? You have your own baggage and your own sins as well. And he said, get out of this town and don't you dare ever come back here ever again. Anyway, that's a good story to start with. Much better than the joke that I had. Thank you, Hashem, for giving me the... I can make a blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihiyah b'dvaro. That's actually a great story to start with for a simple reason. The word holy, you're talking about a holy Jew, is such a dangerous word really to use because it's so vague and so broad. How do you determine what is considered a holy Jew? How do you define it? How do we know what makes someone a holy Jew? How do you define now, it's easy to say, a lot of Jews like to say, I'm a bad Jew. A lot of Jews like to say, I'm a bad Jew. Don't look at me. It's the first defense. And saying I'm a bad Jew is actually a very, very good cop-out. You know what's a cop-out? Because when you say I'm a bad Jew, basically saying is I don't need to become better. I'm bad. I'm a failure. Give up on me. Go nudge. Go speak to him instead. Don't talk to me about doing another mitzvah. And that's a cop-out. That's not the way it's meant to be. We have to recognize that God gave us all. But I don't get into a whole other discussion about people say I'm a bad Jew. But every one of us has both and a calling from God to find ways in which we can be holy. That is our divine calling. That is our divine mission. In fact, not only is it true that in general, of course, when God wants us to be holy, we need to be holy, not use a cop-out and say I'm a bad Jew. But the very opening of this week's parsha, the very title, the very name by which the entire parsha is described, is a parsha called Kedoshim Tiyu. You shall be holy. So let's look for a minute at the opening of this week's Torah reading. Text chapter 19. I don't know if I even zoomed in or not. Chapter 19. I don't know if you can see it or not on the screen. I don't know if I can read it. Is there another copy? Oh, I'll open it up over here. 1 second. If you're watching online, if you can tell me if you can read the text or not, I'm not even sure if you can read it because I can't zoom in. But here's the opening of chapter 19, the opening of this week's Torah reading. God spoke to Moshe saying, speak to the entire congregation of Israel. To the entire congregation of the children of Israel, and say to them, Kedoshim tiyu, you shall be holy. Ki kadosh ani Hashem Elokeichem, because I, Hashem, I, the Lord, your God, am holy. So first of all, before we even get into the holy part, we need to start with the beginning of the verse. The beginning of the verse is a very unique kind of way of God communicating with the Jewish people, where God says, speak to the entire congregation of the children of Israel. Right? Speak to everyone. Now, I have to explain to you for context how God normally communicated a mitzvah to the Jewish people, so you'll appreciate why this verse is very interesting and unique. Normally, when God would give a mitzvah, God would speak to Moshe privately. Moshe would then repeat the mitzvah to Aharon, his brother, the high priest. He would then call in the sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, Lazar, Samar. He would bring in the sons. He would then teach all of them. He would then bring in all the elders. He would teach all the elders. And then he would bring in the entire Jewish community, and Moshe would teach the entire law that he had been taught by God a fourth time to the entire congregation. Then Moshe would leave, and then Aaron would teach the law to the entire congregation. And then Aaron's sons, the priests, would teach the law. And then the elders would teach the law. And this way, every law was learned and repeated and taught 4 times. There was a whole hierarchy how this law was taught so the entire congregation knew it. Here, we have something very different. God says to Moshe to speak to Kol Adas B'nai Yisrael, the entire congregation of the children of Israel. Every single Jew is being gathered for this mitzvah. Every single Jew is being gathered. Now, why is every single Jew being gathered together? Why is God bringing every Jew to hear this mitzvah of being holy? So as Rashi tells us, this teaches us, you see the gray box, the Rashi, speak to the entire congregation of the children of Israel. This teaches us that this passage was stated in the assembly of the entire congregation of Israel, because most of the fundamental teachings of the Torah are dependent on this passage. It's a pretty powerful statement right there. Rashi is telling us that the many laws of the Torah are all dependent upon this foundational building block, if you will, to be holy. So we understand that when God says to us, be holy, there's actually many times in the Torah where God commands us to be holy. This is not the only where we find these words where God tells us, be holy. It's not the only time. But what's unique over here is how this is the command given by where God tells Moshe, gather all the men and all the women, and I guess all the children, the entire community, everyone should be present to hear how I'm commanding them to be holy. So when God says to us, be holy, it's not just a very nice, okay, the Torah wants us to be holy people. This is an explicit command from God to each and every single Jew. Every Jew is being gathered, and every single Jew is being told, I want you to be holy. Which means that it's not what we're going to discuss tonight is not going to be some abstract level of spiritual sanctity that a holy, holy man, as we would normally define holiness, as some religion who prays for many hours a day in deep meditation, because many of us are not on that level. Many of us are not going to sit and spend hours every single day in deep meditation and etc. And yet God is telling each and every one of us, Kedoshim Tiyu, you shall be holy. So there's a clear mitzvah to every single Jew to find a way in which to be holy. Right? We got that. So this is very unique. So I'm going to jump second because I just to cover the point, and then I'm going to go to the main thrust of what we want to discuss tonight. Before we address the main question, what does it to be holy? First there's another question, how can we be holy? How can we go? And there's many, many commentaries on this and many ways of understanding this verse, as I mentioned this morning. I just want to share one, because I just want to kind of just say it, and then we're going to focus on what is God demanding of us. But God tells us to be holy. And then God gives us an explanation or a reason we should be holy. The reason he gives us? Look at the verse. What does God say? Speak to the Jewish people. Tell them to be holy. Why? For I, God, your God, I am holy. Does that help? Yes. Dvorah says yes, and Michelle says no. What do you say, Steve?
I agree with what God says.
You agree with him. Well, God's saying you could be holy. But then God gives you a reason. Steve, you know why you can be holy? Steve, you know why you can be holy? You can be holy because I'm holy. Is that really So I come, let's forget God for a second. I come and say, Steve, you should pray every day for an hour. Why? Because I pray every day for an hour. Okay, and therefore what? The fact that I pray, why does that mean that you should pray? Like, I'm living my life and I am who I am and you are who you are. And the fact that I have a certain life and I pray every day, that in and of itself is not going to inspire you to start praying every single day. I want to inspire you and tell you why you could do it, how you should do it. So God's saying you should be holy. Why? Because I am holy. So how does that help us? How does that help us? What kind of reason is that? And as I said, there's many beautiful interpretations of this. But there's something important to realize here. God is telling us that our holiness is similar to his holiness. If you remember this thought in mind, you will see this in all three things that I'm going to share with you tonight. You can see this idea that this is found in God as well. Meaning God is saying, be holy like me. That's what he's saying. And that's not an interpretation. That's simple. Be holy because I'm holy. Meaning the holiness God demands of us is a holiness similar to his. That sounds very, very intense. We're going to discover it's not so intense and it's something that we all can achieve and we all can, every one of us, at whatever level of religious observance, can be holy. The way God is holy. Not just we can be holy. We can be holy the way God is holy. That's very special. So let's hold that in mind. Now, we'll tell you one other thing, something very beautiful. A Hasidic interpretation, that when God says, be holy because I'm holy, what is God really saying? What is a Jew? We have a soul that is a part of God. So when God says, I am holy, he's not separate from us. We have a part of God inside us. So when God says, be holy because I'm holy, what God says, you could be holy. Why? Because you have a part of me inside you. And says, I am holy, and that there's a part of me in you, that means that you also could be holy. You understand? It's very beautiful. It's very simple. This is the classic Hasidic interpretation. We have a part of God inside us, and therefore we are able to be holy just like God is holy. Okay? Beautiful. So now we come to the main question that we need to understand, we need to address, which is, it's fine, don't worry about it. What does it mean? What does it mean to be a holy Jew? How does Torah, how do the classic commentaries, the rabbis, how do they define holiness when they say that there's a mitzvah to be holy? So I'm going to share with you tonight three perspectives on what does it mean to be holy.
When
Yes.
you practice
When you practice what?
reading Torah, doing what the Torah is.
Okay, so when you study Torah, you're holy. That's true. But that's not what the Torah means. When the Torah says be holy, it doesn't just mean study Torah. If that's what the Torah meant, then the Torah would have said study Torah.
But you're reading it and you're doing what the words say.
And that's a mitzvah. That's a mitzvah. That's a beautiful thing. Definitely, it's a good idea. I don't think. When the Torah says be holy, it's giving you like almost like besides for the mitzvah to learn Torah, besides for the mitzvah to pray, the mitzvah to give charity. You have to give charity. That's a mitzvah. This is something else, something all-inclusive, actually, because it's a foundational rule, but it's not specific to learning Torah per se, because then it will say learn Torah. So Rashi tells us. Rashi doesn't leave us hanging in the dark. Rashi gives us the first interpretation. Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, the most classic commentator on the entire Torah, and we'll look inside exactly what does Rashi tell us. Rashi says, be holy. What is be holy? Separate yourselves from sexual immorality and from sin. For whenever one finds a boundary in sexual immorality, one finds holiness. This is Rashi's answer. Kedusha, holiness, is defined by having sexual boundaries. And he brings three verses. For example, of a verse of the Kohanim shall not take in marriage a prostitute. And that's verse 7. Verse number 8 says, I am the Lord who sanctifies you. So we see the holiness of God associated with the restrictions on who the Kohen can marry. And then the next example Rashi brings is about not profaning it, also about the Kohen, not profaning his offspring. And again, the verse says, I am the Lord who makes him holy. Another example from chapter 21, which is the next two chapters later, about a woman who is a prostitute, one who is profane, and again with the word holy. The point is, Rashi is telling us that the definition of Kedusha, of holiness, is to be proper in your sexual behavior. Now, let's explain that for a second. This is something which is not always talked about so much, but it's a very important concept, and it's the foundation here. God gave us 630 mitzvot, many, many laws, important laws, charity, studying Torah, praying, all these important laws. And the person can do them all. And then afterwards, he goes home at the end of the day, and he goes into his room and no one's looking. He lives in an improper way sexually. Everything that he did, the kedusha, the holiness, is not there. This is what we find many places, many examples in the Torah. Rashi brought us 3. That the way God defines holiness is abstaining or withholding yourself from the greatest urge that God gives us. Now, God gives all of us urges, and some of us have an urge for many other things besides for sexual desires. But the classic, strongest urge, the strongest impulse that God gives a human being when it comes to sexuality. Why is that? Because God wants to test us. God wants to challenge us. And it's very, very difficult for us. I shared, I think Mr. Robert, last week, a beautiful medrash about a king that had a of wine, some very, very expensive aged wine that had been aging for many years. And the king was afraid that some people would steal his wine collection. So what did he do? He hired a special group of guards to guard the wine. Anyway, he comes in the morning, he finds out that one of the guards he had hired was actually an alcoholic. Hiring an alcoholic to guard your wine is maybe not a good idea. Just maybe. Now, I don't know if the king knew before alcohol. He finds out this guy's an alcoholic. So comes the morning, and he goes to check the barrels of wine, and he sees all the barrels are still intact all night. No one touched the wine. And so he pays all the guards for, guarding the wine, pays them all whatever, and he pays the alcoholic guard double. So the other guards complain, that's not fair. We worked the same hard he worked. You know what I'm saying? We all were standing here together. We all were guarding the wine. The king said, it's true. You all guarded the wine, but he had to guard himself to guard the wine. Understand? You were just guarding wine. He was guarding double. He was guarding himself and he was guarding the wine. So because he was doing double work, I paid him double. Meaning, God deliberately makes us alcoholics in charge of the alcohol. I'm being metaphorical, but he gives us temptation, and he gives us confusion and distraction and seduction and all of the challenges that people face when it comes to immoral sexual sins, because that's the greatest reward. From a deeper perspective, before that, and it's a fascinating thing if you think about it. If you look at the world, you see how many successful people, how many holy people, rabbis, priests, politicians, millionaires who destroyed their entire lives because they couldn't control themselves. And and there's presidents of many, many countries. I heard you. President of Israel too. It's not unique to one party, by the way. It's saying, and it's across the board. It's a human challenge that God deliberately created within us in order to challenge us to pay us double when we can guard ourselves and guard the wine, to be able to do both. But it's a challenge. And God says, if you want holiness, this is the area that if you can withhold in these temptations, that's where you find holiness. Now, simply Rashi says this because the very end of the last week's Torah reading is all about the laws of forbidden immorality. And the end of this week's Torah reading will also be repeating those laws. But from a deeper spiritual perspective, why is it specifically in sexual desire that we have such struggle and where we have such a great clarity that the definition of Kedusha, holiness, is specifically in this area of all the areas of our life? So from a spiritual perspective, we know a very important rule, a very important principle in life. The greater something is, the more dangerous it can become. Right? And this is true with anything in the world. Show me anything. The more powerful it is, the more dangerous it is. You start with a knife, right? Let's say a knife. You have a butter knife. It's not very sharp. It's not very dangerous. If it's sharp, it's more dangerous. The more sharp, the more dangerous. And this is with everything. Money, right? The more powerful something is, the more power, the more influence, the more dangerous that thing can be. And the most powerful thing that exists in the world is the ability to procreate. The ability of man, yes, but the ability of man to go forth and multiply and to create a child is the absolutely most godlike, holy thing a human being can ever do in their entire life. Because everything else that we do is just changing one physical thing to something else. So we give charity, which is a beautiful mitzvah. You're taking money and you're making it holy, but the money existed before. So you're just changing the status of the money from unholy to holy. You make a blessing on the food, and you make the food from unholy to holy. We'll talk about all these things a little bit later tonight. But when you create a child, it's like literally like making something out of nothing. And when God made the world, how did God make the world? He didn't make the world something out of something. He made the world something out of nothing. Yesh ma'ayin. Excellent, excellent, very good. In classic Kabbalistic terminology, very well said. God created the world, exactly right. Yesh ma'ayin. A something from a nothing. There's a famous story about this scientist, an atheist, who's having a debate with God. Deal, you made a world, and I could also do it. With enough technology, I could also create something. So God says, okay, let's see. So they start going to the laboratory, and the scientist takes a glass testing tube and starts pouring some water into it. So God said, hey, get your own glass and your own. Don't use my water. Understand? So that's the first idea over here. It's a struggle. And something that's not always talked about, something which is not always, because for whatever reason, good or bad. But the Rashi is telling us over here, the definition of holiness is in the area that's least obvious. Usually, not something public. Kedusha, holiness, a holy Jew is not a Jew. Let me say this one thing. A holy Jew is not a Jew that goes in the morning and prays for 4 hours. That is a holy Jew. And that's a beautiful thing, and it's a very holy thing to do. But that in and of itself does not define the holiness of the person. You want to know where a person really proves holiness? When they're faced with a sexual desire. When they're alone and nobody can see them. And nobody will know if they're watching porn or not watching porn. Nobody will know if they end up being with this person or not being with this person. No one will know. My sign if someone might see you. Yeah, Luke did better. But he tried. Points for effort. But when no one sees, that's the greatest holiness. Hasidim used to have an expression that is not a kunst, not a trick to be a tzaddik under your talus. Under your talus, it's not a trick to be holy. You put a talus over your head and you're in synagogue, and it's a trick to be holy under your blanket. In Yiddish, under the koldera, under the blanket. That's where it's harder to be holy. So the definition of holiness and perspective number one that Rashi gives us is holiness is not defined by the talus, it's defined by the blanket. Okay? Let's go to a second perspective, which is in the Ramban. Nachmanides, it's a very lengthy Ramban. I learned through it. I didn't put the text. It's a long Ramban. I'm not going to go through it in text. I'll just tell it to you and give you the key words, my favorite words. So the Ramban says, he quotes first Rashi. And by the way, what Rashi says is not a unique opinion, but I'll say something else. The Orach Chaim says also a similar thing, that when God commands us to be holy, God is actually giving us both a positive mitzvah and a negative mitzvah to all of the negative mitzvot, all the forbidden relationships in last week's parsha. Meaning the Orach Chaim says that in last week's parsha was a whole long list of forbidden relations. Can't be with your mother-in-law, with your grandmother, and with your daughter, and your aunt, your aunt and your sister-in-law, and your sister and your brother's wife. All sins. So a person does any of these forbidden relationships. A person marries a woman and her daughter together. Or a person marries two sisters. Committed a sin. That's a commandment. Here, when the Torah says in the positive, Kedoshim Tiyu, the Torah is now creating both a negative and a positive. A mitzvah aseh for the same laws in the last chapter 18, which means, says the Orach Chaim as follows, based on the Gemara in Kedushin, a fascinating Gemara. that when a person sits quietly and he refrains from committing and doing a transgression, he didn't do anything. Held himself back from doing something he shouldn't have done. It's as if he's given reward, as if he had actively performed the positive mitzvah. You understand? By not doing something, the Torah, the Talmud, and Kedushin tells us, it's as if he's rewarded, as if he had actively performed the positive commandment. So you have an opportunity, that's what the Aruch HaChaim says, you have an opportunity to do a sin, and you don't do it. That itself is a positive mitzvah, a double reward. Not just you didn't do the transgression, you didn't do anything. You refrained from going to a website. You refrained from engaging with a person you shouldn't be engaging with. You refrained from getting into a dangerous situation. Alone is an active mitzvah, an active mitzvah. Beautiful. And that's also why the Aruch HaChaim says that when God tells Moshe to teach this law to the Jewish people, he says, teach it to everybody, the men and the women equally. It applies to every single person. They need to hear this firsthand. Because it's so difficult, because it's something that people have struggled with so tremendously, God wants to hear them to hear it directly. Okay. That's all perspective number one. Now let's go to perspective number two from the Ramban. The Ramban says that in Torah's Kohanim, I have seen it eventually Rashi, this idea of Kedoshim, and it says, Havei Prushim. These are the words of the Ramban, Havei Prushim, which means be removed. And does not specify anything about sexuality or immorality. It just says be removed. And so from here, we learn that the Ramban says, when the God says be holy, he's not referring specifically to any kind of sexual sins. He's referring to all of the commandments of the Torah. But in what way? We just finished in the last few weeks learning about a long list of different things that are forbidden. Parsha Shmini, which was a few weeks ago, went through all the animals you can't eat, all the birds you can't eat, and the fish you can't eat, and I don't know, the different fancy foods the person would want to eat. And then we went through all the forbidden relationships, and we went through all kinds of things of tumah and of impurity, and no lizards and no whatever, a lot of stuff you can't do, and how to slaughter an animal, how to do it cold and all that. So finally, after all of these prohibitions and all these restrictions, a Jew can say to himself, okay, I'm separating myself from everything. I'm not going to eat anything non-kosher. I would never walk into a non-kosher restaurant. I would never violate Shabbos. I would never be with a woman I'm not allowed to be with. But in that which I'm permitted to have, I'm going to be a party animal. I'm going to be a glutton. So I can't eat not kosher, but I can eat kosher. And I'm going to eat like a pig. Kosher, all glatt kosher, mahadrin, top of the line, kosher, right? But I'm a pig. Same thing with intimacy. A person, I'm only being with my wife, but you can be intimate with your wife in a holy way, and I'm going to discuss a little more later, or in a very crass, unholy way. It's not a loving relationship. It's permitted. It's my wife. A person can speak negative language, dirty language. Now, the Torah gives a whole list of things to say. You're not allowed to curse God. You can't speak bad about someone else. But there's no sin to curse, like foul language, or to speak dirty. That's not a sin. So I won't say any words that I'm not allowed to say, but in the words that I could say, I'll speak dirty. Says the Ramban, a person could become a novel b'rshus haTorah. These are the words that are classic words. 3 words. A novel means a disgusting person within the permission of the Torah. He doesn't do any sin. He checks all the checklists, all the check boxes. Kosher, check. My wife permitted to me, check. Check. But how does he behave? Like a lowlife. He behaves like a disgusting animal. He's keeping kosher. He's religious, but he behaves like a disgusting human being. Comes the Torah and says to you, after I give you all these restrictions, in that which is permitted to you, you shall be holy. Understand? It's very, very important. Meaning here what he's saying is, have some restraint, have some separation, even in that which you're allowed to have. So yes, you're allowed to eat and eat kosher meat, but doesn't mean you should be eating 3 steaks and guzzling down the wine and eating gluttonously every single meal. Yes, you're allowed to be intimate with your wife. You're allowed to do anything you want in the bedroom. There's no restrictions necessarily. There's whatever. Let's leave it at that. But there's still things that are considered moral and proper, and things which are not allowed in the bedroom. Together, for example, when she's angry or he's angry or force her, there has to be, technically, she's my wife. There's things, there's other examples, but we'll stay clean. We're on Facebook. That would be within the technical box of, I didn't commit adultery. But they were totally out of the holiness of Judaism. And so too in the way we speak and the things we talk about or the things we think about. So I'm not doing something forbidden. I'm not actually doing a sin, but within the rules of Torah, I'm a disgusting human being. Says the Torah, Kedoshim to you. Have restraint. Have some self-awareness in that which is allowed to you. There's a famous Hasidic saying, another famous Hasidic saying, the Alter Rebbe, that they said that which is forbidden, it's in Yiddish. Was bin tormenisht. What you're not allowed to have, you're not allowed to have. Und was bin meg, darf bin nicht. That which you're allowed, you don't need. You don't need it. What you're not allowed to have, you're not allowed to have. What you're allowed to have, darf bin nicht. You don't need it. So, okay, I have to eat some food. But to have this pleasure, this excitement, this joy in the food that I'm eating, be holy. Be holy. Understand? Okay. And this is true in every mitzvah that we have, and especially the big things, in the things that the Torah had gone through previously before. No things specifically. What we eat, and the way we're intimate with our spouse, and the way we talk, etc. Those are the examples he brings. Now let's go to the third idea, the third mindset, which is based on the Gemara. So let's share the Gemara in Yevamos. And clear so far? Any questions? We're good. Okay. So here's the Gemara in Yevamos 28. It's talking about who a Kohen Gadol is not allowed to marry. Almana, whatever, by a Yevama, when you do Yibum, whatever. Let's not confuse you. Whatever. Doesn't make a difference what it's talking about. But the Gemara is talking about holiness. So the Gemara says, we're talking about a woman that's forbidden to the Kohen Gadol, not biblically, but only rabbinically. So Abaya says, whoever fulfills the word, the Gemara is asking, why is it called a holy, forbidden because of holiness? So Abaya says, whoever fulfills the words of the sages is called holy. It's called kadosh. It's called sacred. That's what Abaya says. As long as you do what the rabbis say, you're called kadosh. So this woman that's forbidden to the high priest, rabbinically, it's called a prohibition of holiness because you do what the rabbis say. Rava says to him, whoever does not fulfill the words of the sages is not called holy. Is he not also called wicked? He's wicked if you don't do the words of the sages. It's not like you're not holy. If the rabbis say to do something or not to do something and you don't listen to the words, you're considered a sinner. It's considered a rasha, so that's not holy. Rather, Rava said the following words: Kadesh atzmacha b'mutar lach. Sanctify yourself in that which is permitted to you. I just remember the story I wanted to say. Okay, I'll say it afterwards. Sanctify yourself in that which is permitted to you. What does it mean, sanctify yourself in that which is permitted to you? So simply what Rava is saying over here is a definition of kedusha, definition of holiness, is that which you do, which is permitted to you, should be done in a holy way. So let me explain this with a little bit of a Hasidic, perspective. The way I understand this Gemara, what Rava is saying is as follows. Definition of holiness is not about an action. It's not about an action, but rather it's about a mindset. It's not about an action, but it's about a mindset. It's about a mindset, which means as follows. You can do something which is permitted to you, even without being a glutton, without being a terribly low life person. You're not eating, but why are you eating? Are you eating just because you enjoy the food? Or are you eating for a holy reason? It's not just about removing yourself and having some level of restraint in the amount of food that you eat, that you don't stuff yourself till you're a gorged ox, but that you eat with moderation, which is what the Ramban was saying, but rather infuse a holiness into that which you are eating. Infuse a holiness into that which you are eating. A person is intimate with their spouse. So you're intimate, of course, you're allowed to be intimate. It's a mitzvah to be intimate. You're supposed to be intimate. But when you're being intimate, it's not about the action. What is the mindset at that moment? It's not only about what are we doing. Is it holy or not holy? Are we behaving like animals in the bedroom? Are we behaving like two people in love with each other who are caring for each other and making each other happy in the bedroom? But besides for that, what's the mindset? What's the inner purpose? What's the objective of this moment? Am I here to enjoy myself? Am I here to have a good time? Or am I here to go forth and have children and to do what God wants us to do? Which is not only about having children, it's also about having a happy, loving marriage. I should clarify. Because you don't only have intimacy to have children. It's a mitzvah even when it's not going to be a child being born. The person's past their time. Or the person is pregnant already. It's still a mitzvah. But the mindset is, I'm doing what God wants. I'm building a loving home in a holy way and fulfilling a mitzvah, which includes making my wife happy. Or am I here for my own pleasure? And let me clarify. So we have three stages here. Rashi says, what does it mean to be holy? To be holy means don't be intimate with a woman you're not allowed to be intimate with. That is the greatest sin. You do that, you ruined it. God says that's the worst kind of sin. The Ramban, and the others, Arachaim explains similarly. The Ramban is going a step further and saying have a prushim, not specifically be removed, not just from forbidden woman, but even in a permitted woman, your wife, don't be an animal. Don't be an animal. Don't be a nafal b'shus hatera. Don't be a disgusting person, a disgusting creature, but within the box of what's technically allowed by the rules. It's not just the law, it's the spirit of the law, if you will. Behave in a moderate way. Don't be intimate every single night in a way of moderation. Hold yourself back. Do it in the proper way. The words of Rava and the Gemara, sanctify yourself in that which is permitted to you, is not about an action. It's about infusing a holiness, infusing a sense of purpose into that which I'm doing because it's allowed to. If I want to use modern day psychology words, you call it mindfulness. Mindfulness is to be mindful of why am I eating. So most people eat mindlessly. They don't really think about why they're eating or even what they're eating. I'm guilty of tonight. Tonight my wife made a delicious supper. Delicious supper with chicken and all that and rice and broccoli and grilled broccoli and onion. I ate. It was delicious. And my picky kids don't like my wife's supper, which is, how could you not like Hannah's cooking if you're one of my picky kids? You don't ask. They don't like it. So whatever. My wife can have cereal and milk. So my son put a box of honey nut cheerios on the table. And mindlessly, I started eating honey nut cheerios. And I already ate. I was still like hungry. Like, I started eating. I'm like, why am I eating this? Like, you put it in front of me. Like, why am I eating this? So it's mindless eating. Now, there was no sin to eat honey nut cheerios. They're kosher. They have an OU. They're fine. There's no... I obviously didn't have any milk, it was just he wasn't eating milk either. He was eating them plain. So there was no sin. It wasn't even like a lack of moderation. I wasn't like gorging myself. I was just eating from his bowl. I'm eating Cheerios. But it's mindless. There was no. If I would have been mindful, if I would have infused holiness into the food I was eating at that moment, I would have said, I don't need honey nut Cheerios. I just ate chicken and rice and grilled onions and grilled broccoli and grilled potatoes. Grilled peppers. Like I'm not. You think I'm home for dinner, right? I'm not hungry. I just ate. Now you're hungry. Yeah. It's like I don't know, the seasoning was I'll describe it like a shawarma seasoning. It was very good. I ate. I'm not, but yet that's what Rava is saying. Means you're eating, but be mindful, be holy. Recognize I'm eating, so I can bring holiness into what I'm eating. So I can bring holiness into that. There's a story, a beautiful story of a chassid. I don't remember what I was trying to think right before we started. I asked my family. I don't remember. I think it was a very wealthy man. I think it was in the town of Shklov. Shklov was a big non-Chabad, non-Hasidic town. And this wealthy chassid decided to build himself a big, massive house in the center of town. Biggest house. So one of the other Hasidim, one of his friends, saw that he's building this big house, a big, fancy home. And Hasidim, generally, we don't like to show off. He's supposed to be humble, a certain sense of, moderation. Like, why are you building this massive mansion, middle of town? What do you need to be so showy, so pretentious? So he gave it to him over the head a little bit, to the friend. Like, why are you spending so much money on a beautiful home? So he said, you think I need a home? I know that wherever is the nicest home is where the community meetings will be held. There's a community, what's the word I'm looking for? The commissioner, whatever, the community board, and every month, whatever they meet. And wherever there's a nice house, that's where the meetings will be. So if I have the nicest house, I'll become the host of the meetings. I'll be able to host meetings in my home. And if I'm the host of the meeting, then my opinion will carry more weight. And this way, even though it's a town of mainly it's not a Hasidic town, by being the host, I'll be able to have more influence on the spiritual direction of the town and certain decisions where I feel that a little bit of pressure is needed to maintain a certain standard. I'll be able to use my influence because I have a big home. Understand? So to build a big home, it's permitted. There's no sin to have a big home. I don't know. Rashi says, no big deal, nakdosha. The Ramban will tell you, moderation. Have a prushim. Restrain yourself. Don't go overboard. I mean, obviously, you don't have to live in cramped quarters, but you don't have to make such a fancy home. But Kaddish Atzvecha B'Mutalach means to infuse a holiness and to infuse spirituality into what we're doing to make it holy. To make it holy. What's the purpose? So with that, I'll share with you a story. I had another good story to share, but I missed the moment. Should I tell you two stories?
Yes.
Okay. So I wanted to tell the story before. I didn't make proper notes. I'll tell you one of my favorite stories about being a novel b'Reshus HaTorah. Two stories. One, an example of a person who's a disgusting human being within the rules of Torah. And then I'll tell you a story, the exact opposite dimension of a person who did not seem to be very holy, but actually had infused a lot of holiness into that which was permitted, but was seemingly very, very simplistic. Okay? Two opposite stories. So the first one is a story of this guy who was a miser. A miser. Didn't like to share very much. And one day his next door neighbor was a very, very poor man. He was knocking on his door and says, I haven't eaten 3 days. I feel so weak. I'm going to die. I'm begging you for some food. He didn't like his neighbor. He was a poor guy. They didn't want to give away any food. He was about to kick him away. He remembered that sitting in they didn't have fridges back then, sitting in the back in the garbage was leftover fish. From Shabbos, he had leftover fish that wasn't good anymore. It smelled. He wasn't going to eat it himself. This is not a guy who threw away food so easily. But even he didn't want to eat it. It smelled really bad. I'll give it to this food that I'm not going to eat. I'll give it to my next door neighbor. So he goes to the back. He gets the smelly fish that was already getting spoiled, and he goes to give it to his neighbor. Guy's so happy. He takes the food. He eats it. Guess what happens? He gets really sick and ends up in the hospital. The next day, the guy comes home. Tells him, that our neighbor, they took him, the ambulance came, took him to the hospital. He was it was terrible. He's very sick. Okay. It's a mitzvah, biko chayla, mitzvah to visit the sick. He goes to the hospital to visit his neighbor. Next day he comes home, his wife tells him, Nevach, this guy passed away. Okay, it's a mitzvah to go to the funeral. So in company, comes to the fire wrestling place. He goes to the funeral. Next day comes home, tells the wife, I have to go to the Shiva home. The kids, a bunch of mourners, the orphans at home, have to go pay a Shiva visit. He comes home from the Shiva visit, and his face is glowing. He's the happiest man you ever saw. Wife looked at her, very, very, not happy husband usually, very, very, by the book. He's so happy. She says, what are you so happy? Just came from a Shiva home. My next door neighbor passed away. Like, why are you smiling? Why are you so joyful? So I'm thinking about it. Look at how many mitzvahs I was able to do with one piece of rotten, moldy fish. With one piece of moldy fish. I can feed the poor. I can visit the sick. I can bury the dead. I can comfort the mourners. 4 mitzvahs for one piece of moldy fish. You understand? That is a beautiful example of a naval Rishus HaTorah. He's a disgusting human being, but he has all the check boxes checked off. You understand? He didn't break any laws, but he was very far from holy. Very far from holy. He didn't break any laws. So the Torah says, these are all the forbidden things. You can't eat this. You can't be with that woman. You can't be with that woman. But in that which is permitted, be holy. That's one perspective. The other perspective, Baal Shem Tov once, he was in heaven, he looked and he wanted to know who's a holy person going to get a big Gan Eden. He saw there was a wood shopper in a certain town that was going to get a big Gan Eden. So he goes to visit this wood shopper and he comes to his house, see who he is, this person. He comes and he sees a guy comes home from work. Guy weighed a good like 500 pounds, this big ogre of a human being. He sits down by the table. He looks like a real peasant. Tells his wife, let's go, bring out the food, I'm hungry. And she starts bringing out platters of food. He mumbles a blessing to himself. And this guy devours 15 portions of food. No joke. He's pounding the food down like it's going out of fashion. Like he's about to go into a famine. And the Baal Shem Tov was there in the home. And he's watching. He barely eat. The guy's like gobbling down food, like it's gobbling on his shirt. He's burping, he's slurping, he's eating, he's gobbling for a half hour straight. The guy doesn't stop eating. Baal Shem Tov never saw anyone eat so much in his life. Couldn't believe it. Anyway, he's watching. Maybe during the night, the guy will get in the middle of the night and do like prayers in the middle of the night when no one's looking, like a holy man in secret, a hidden tzaddik. But the whole night he's up. He hears the guy snoring soundly. He never woke up. No midnight prayers, no nothing. He watches. The next day, the guy quickly prays in the morning. Didn't even go to Shulchan Aruch Dominion. Puts on the tefillin, prays very quickly. Off to go. He eats a breakfast. Took long in his morning prayers for him to eat the breakfast. 20 pieces of toast and eggs, and he eats a whole breakfast. Goes to work. Comes back in the evening again. The guy pounds down the food. The guy's massive, and he doesn't stop eating. After 2 days of watching this, Baal Shem Tov says to him, "I don't know, why do you eat so much?" He's trying to understand, like, why is this guy going to get Gan Eden? Like, what's so special about this person? Looks like an there's a word for him. He like overeat. So the guy says to him as follows: when I was a young boy, there was a pogrom in town. There was a pogrom, you know what a pogrom is, right? The Russians came, the peasants, and their my father was an old Jew, a holy Jew, who sat and prayed all day, never ate, small, tiny little yidela. Small little guy, he weighed 150 pounds, you know what I'm saying? And they grabbed him, and they tied him up to a thing, and they burnt him. They burnt him alive. And I watched his body burn up very quickly. He was a little person. He weighed nothing. He burnt him in a matter of minutes, burnt up. I said, I'm going to make sure that if they ever grab me to burn me, I'm going to burn and burn and burn for a long time. And so I eat a lot of food because one day, this is the trauma of this child, they'll take me and tie me up and tell me to convert it. They're going to burn me. Burn for God. I want there to be a lot of me burning. Understand? So he was eating like a glutton, but there was a purpose. Every meal he ate was for the sake that if one day he should be burned for the sake of God, there should be a lot of him to burn. This is the highest level. And any one of us can do this. Any one of us can achieve a level of kedusha in that which is permitted to us. A level of mindfulness, a level of awareness, of recognizing, why am I eating? Am I eating because I'm a glutton? Am I eating just because I like the food? Am I eating to be healthy, to do a good thing? Am I working just because I want money? Today I had a meeting with someone who's retiring, and he's gonna whatever. Like he works. He said, "I work to give charity." Like to recognize what is the reason why I work. What is the reason why I'm eating? Why am I living? Why am I existing? And when we recognize and we're aware and we're mindful of why we exist, that brings a kaddish atzmacha b'motalach. That brings a holiness into that which is permitted to us. Oh, and that's why it's like God. Because God, how is God holy? God's holiness is in everything. God's holiness is not limited to a sanctuary, to a synagogue. God created the whole world. And anything in the world that's permitted to us, we can infuse a holiness into that by bringing God into that. And that's our mitzvah. That's our command that God says, be holy. How could we be holy? Simple. Just be mindful. Just be aware and recognize our divine purpose and our mission in everything that we do. Okay, my friends, that's the story. Laila Tov. Laila Tov. I hope you all enjoyed. I don't see really any comments here. I don't know if people are watching or not. I see in Chabad.org. We got some comments. Shalom from Dvorah Chana from Pennsylvania. Thank you. And Boker Tov from the Philippines, the Concord. And Shalom, Johan and Muhammad. These are holy. Oh, boy. Let's comment. Okay, my friend. Anyway, Laila Tov. See you all, God willing, next week. If you were able to watch it on my personal page, I don't see any comments. I don't know if you were able to watch it or not. Hopefully, you were. Okay. God bless you both. Laila Tov.